Greetings folks, it's time to attack another Past Planes episode. This time we're starting the year 2019, which was a very prolific year for me for testing building planes. Here's a page of all the planes that have passed through my hands, and there's a total of 39. Some of them are sort of different versions of the same plane, but there are quite a few new planes, some that I've built myself, some that I've rejigged. So there's going to be a few episodes for 2019, probably 4 or 5 videos maybe. But anyway, let's start it off. First plane of the year for me in 2019 was the Cargotrans C160. And it sort of coincided with the Hobby King release of the C130. So cargo planes were all the rage. I couldn't afford a C130. They're just too big and too expensive for me. Banggood came out with the C160. And it was quite cheap. It was a kit that cost something like $45, $50 I think. So I thought I'd give that a go. It's a nice size model. It's about 1120 millimeter wingspan. Small, but not too small. 700 gram flying weight I came up with. Now, this kit has been around for quite a long time under another name, I think, by another manufacturer. And it's not a modern kit at all. It sort of comes from the early days of foam, really. So it's kind of by today's standards, it's quite a low quality kit. Quite basic. Had to do a lot of building, a lot of gluing together. But I quite enjoyed the build. You sort of have to bring a lot of your own skills to the build, do some hacks and mods and decide whether you want to add a battery hatch in the top like I did, or you can put the battery in up underneath where the wheels go. One interesting thing about this model is that although they call it the C160, the profile shape is more like a C130. So it's a bit of a mix-up between the two planes, I think. Maybe they didn't think they had the rights to call the plane the C130, so they reduced the number of motors to 2 and called it the C160. Anyway, they're reasonably similar, just that the tail shape is much more like the 130 than the 160. Once I got it together and flying, it was quite fun to fly, and surprisingly, because it's sort of low to the ground and the wheels are small, and there's a nose wheel and 4 belly wheels, it actually could take off from reasonably tough grass without any problems. It's not going to nose over or anything like that. So you could sort of, because it had twin motors, you have plenty of power, you can plough through the grass and take off and land quite well too. The wings were too flexy. It did come with a spar, but it's just a fiberglass spar, I think. So I ended up adding my own extra spar to stiffen the wings up even more. I actually ended up adding more cord to the wing as well. It was reasonably high wing loading, sort of low, narrow cord wing. It might have been correct scale, but it meant that you couldn't really fly at scale. You couldn't fly it nice and slow like you would with a big cargo plane. So I added a 15 millimeter to the trailing edge and sort of sanded it down to a nice taper, and that really improved it quite a lot. It could fly nice and slow after that. Before that, it was definitely a bit tip-stally, and you had to fly it reasonably fast. Also with this plane, I decided to try some camouflage painting, and I chose the snow scheme, which is very easy because you just need black and grey paint, and then you just paint odd blobby shapes on it, and the basic white of the foam forms part of the paint scheme as well. You don't have to paint it all over. Turned out looking absolutely fantastic, I think. I don't know if it's realistic to have snow camouflage on the C160, but I thought it looked great. With the twin motors, you can play around with differential thrust. I personally don't like the differential thrust in the air unless you're doing crazy aerobatics, but it's great for steering on the ground. In fact, I eventually, because I bonked the nose in a few times and ruined the steerable nose wheel, I changed that to a fixed nose wheel, and with a differential thrust, it just takes care of the steering and taxiing on the ground. This kit is still available today, and if you're not concerned about adding your extra strengthening and quite a bit of a build, sort of doing some mods and things like that, I think it's quite a good model, really. I wouldn't pay too much for it. It's definitely cheap and old school and reasonably poor quality, I suppose. Treat it as a basis for your own additional features and strengthening, and you'd be quite happy with it, I think. It's not a bad little plane. I don't have it anymore. Why? I basically just had to get rid of some planes, so I wasn't flying that one all that much, and I wanted to use the twin motors for something else. So yeah, there's a lot of electronics and gear goes into a twin motor plane, so I pulled it apart and it's gone bye-bye. Next up, we come to the Trixler, or the triplane Bixler. It was originally a Bixler 3. I had the Bixler 1, the Bixler 2 and the Bixler 3. I didn't really like the Bixler 3 all that much, so that was sitting there gathering dust. And I was just looking at consolidating some of the extra wings and planes that I had, so I thought I'd try some experimentation with that one. First of all, I made it into a biplane Bixler, and that flew pretty well. Worked reasonably well. I stuck the extra wing underneath, and that was an old Bixler 1. Then I decided to go one further. One of my YouTube friends, Keith, said he had a spare Bixler 3 wing, so he, through some family members, sent that down to me. So I made up some plywood interplane struts and basically glued the third wing above the normal Bixler 3 wing. And that got me thinking about décollage, or the relative angle between the different wings in a biplane or a triplane. So I thought I'd make the décollage of the top wing adjustable so that I could experiment with it a little bit. So here's how I made sort of a hinge in the interplane struts and connected that to a servo so I could actually alter the décollage in flight. And that turned out to be not such a good idea, because I think everything was a bit too flexy, and I had a bit too much movement on the décollage, and once I had the décollage of the top wing tilted down, yeah, the plane just went into a dive basically, and I lost control of it and crashed it. So I didn't really learn much from that experiment. I also tried it on the slope, and it kind of worked, I suppose, after a few crashes and things like that. It was sort of slow and draggy, but so much lift that it stayed up without any problems. But anyway, that was a lot of fun and a good way to get rid of a plane and a few extra wings, I suppose. Again, I did the camouflage paint job on that one. Rather than having rounded blobs, I had sort of square blobs or angled blobs, and they're a lot easier to mask out and paint. So I thought that looked pretty good too. Now, next on the list is the Hummingbird biplane. I wanted to continue on experimenting with décollage. So I took the extra Bixler 3 wing that I had from the Trixler and added it to my de Havilland Hummingbird DH53. It's a scratch-built retro plane that I built that I wasn't flying much anymore, so was available for experimentation. So I came up with a different system of adjusting the décollage between the bottom wing and the top wing, and it was more rigid. It wasn't sort of adjustable in air. Different holes that I could pop the angling mechanism in and lock it in place. That made the whole structure more solid, so I could more accurately adjust the décollage, and that turned out quite successful. That was really good. The conventional wisdom with décollage is that slight positive décollage is the way to do it, so that the upper wing has a higher angle of attack, or the front of the upper wing is slightly up higher, and that means that the top wing will always stall before the bottom wing, which is what you want, because if the top wing is forward of the bottom wing and it stalls first, then it becomes more nose heavy. If the bottom wing or the rear wing stalls first, then it'll end up tail heavy. And the experiments with this little plane confirmed that. So I found that with a little bit of negative décollage, the plane would tuck under and pitch up and down, very unstable and unpredictable in pitch. With a little bit of positive décollage, it was much more controllable, much smoother as well. And I started off with just the rough camo wing, then I painted it again and covered it with tape and put some Australian RAF roundels on there, make it look nice. But yeah, that was a fun exercise, and learned a lot about décollage from that. Next in line is the little CK840 EPP FPV flying wing. And this was a nice little wing, really. It was a bit of a surprise because it was quite a basic profile, basic airfoil made out of soft EPP, rough surface and everything like that. It was an interesting mix between an old style home-built wing and modern materials with Nice reinforcing plates, top and bottom, and on the elevons as well. Plenty of space in it for FPV cameras, and they'd thought about where to put things like video transmitter, FPV camera, HD camera. And I was surprised about how well it flew too. It was actually very easy to fly, very low fuss, a bit like the AR wing. It could fly slow, it could fly fast. It didn't have much in the way of yaw waggles, which a lot of those little FPV wings do have. It was just a nice plane to fly. And being EPP, it's fairly robust and tough. You're not going to put dings in it too badly. It was a basic airfoil, didn't have any reflex cut into it that I could see, so you did need to kick the elevons up a little bit, but that's often the case with flying wings. Comes as a kit, so you put your own gear on it, which is good. You can put, a racy little quad motor on it and keep it light, or put a big motor and go fast. Mine came out at 570 grams all up. Still available today, and if you're considering it, it's definitely a good wing. I don't have it anymore. I've given it away to someone else. I just have too many other wings. But seriously, it's pretty much as good as any other wings I have. All right, next up was the little Mini Surfer 800, a little mini pusher motor glider style plane, shaped like the Bixlers, the AXN floater jets and those sorts of things, but in a smaller size. It was made from EPP. Mine came as a kit. You can also get the plug and play version, I think. It was interesting. Didn't have a rudder. It was just ailerons and elevator. It was pretty crude kit, I suppose. You had to take the wings off to get access inside. I decided to cut a hatch in the top just to make it easy to get a battery in there. Kind of a little bit heavy and not really well designed, I don't think. It was kind of fast and twitchy, really, not really as glidey as you want these planes to be. Certainly not a good beginner's plane, I don't think. I got it flying okay after a while. Had a few little problems, but that was mainly my gear that was giving problems. And the all-up weight was about 350 grams or something like that. So it wasn't really a lightweight for the size, and just it was made from EPP, so it was kind of tough, but a little bit heavy and flexy as well. What I decided to do with it was turn it into a tractor instead of a pusher, just for fun, and try and reduce the weight and get it down to a sub 250 gram little FPV plane. So I chopped off the nose, stuck on a little motor, used a smaller battery. With the pusher setup, I used a 1300 3S, I think, which is where a lot of the weight came from, but it needed the weight to get the CG right anyway. In the tractor setup, I was using a 950 milliamp hour 2S, and it came in under 250 grams with this little FPV camera on there. This is the Ranger 750, a similar sort of model, but much better. We'll talk about that in the future. And that worked pretty well, but we had some really bad adverse yaw for some reason. Really bad. I had to use about 60-70% differential to get it to fly nicely. Every now and then it would just refuse to turn. So then I decided to turn it into a 3-channel rudder, elevator, throttle, get rid of the ailerons, put in a rudder servo, bend the wingtips up a little bit so we could turn nicely with just the rudder, and that turned out to be the best setup for me. That actually worked well as a sub 250 gram little FPV plane. Quite a lot of fun. So in the end, I guess it was a good basis for experimenting with other setups, but didn't keep it very long. It just wasn't good enough in that range, nowhere near as good as the Ranger 750, I don't think, for a little plane. Being little, you would think they were good beginners planes, but often, when they get too heavy, you just have to fly them too fast, and they're fast and nimble, so hard to handle. Anyway, an interesting little plane to play with. And finally, for this Past Planes number 15, there will be more coming soon, don't worry. I'll keep them going because I need something to do, and hopefully this will entertain you as well. Finally, I'll talk about my inspired by scale model of the Bleriot XI, the first heavier-than-air plane to fly across the English Channel. 1909, I think that was, one of the pioneers of aviation. So this is a rough approximation of a Bleriot XI. This is what the real thing looks like, and you can see that mine isn't even close, really. It's more just a suggestion. It's very difficult to get the weight far forward enough, because they used heavy old cast iron engines, I suppose, and yeah, even getting the battery far enough ahead of the CG to help with the balance is very difficult. So you end up with a much longer nose than scale. Anyway, I actually made this one in 2018, but in 2019 I changed from the all foam box body to this sort of slightly more authentic framework fuselage. And I'm still going to go further and do this properly all the way through eventually. Anyway, it's kind of gives the impression of the model it's based on, and it does fly reasonably well with a big 3004S battery in the front, an extra LED on the nose, and wheels as far forward as possible. It looks good in the sky, and the onboard footage looks pretty good as well. Something I'm going to continue working on. It was a fun model to make. Hot wire cut XPS foam, a bit of balsa just for looks really, a bit of plywood there for strength, Depron tail surfaces, and a bit of carbon reinforcing in the front there. Looks great, actually flies reasonably well too, but something I'll continue working on. So that's it for Past Planes number 15. As I said, more coming. Try and keep your spirits up. This is what I'm doing to keep myself busy. Hopefully it entertains you a little bit. I've got 1,000 videos on YouTube if you want to go back and have a look at previous builds, flights and things like that. Hopefully it'll do a little bit to ease the stress of the current situation. Please take it seriously. Please keep your social distance and wash your hands regularly as soon as you touch something. Don't touch other people or your face if you can possibly avoid it. Take it seriously. And hopefully we can slow down this spread and come through the other side so that we can continue on having fun, flying RC, making planes and interacting on YouTube. Thanks for watching.